Okay, this video is an extension or a continuation of the previous video on reference control between models. In this particular assembly, I'm currently showing a shell and a punch for like a side motion. And I want to demonstrate one other possible way to pass information between the two models, and that's by directly referencing the sketch itself. Now this is different than referencing the sketch entities. We're going to actually reference the sketch. So if we look at this particular model, this shell, you'll see that I have a sketch feature right now that's defining this star shape. So it's a standalone sketch, and then later the extrude here is referencing that sketch, and it's just a link between the two. Matter of fact, if I do an edit definition on this extrude and then go to placement, you can see that the sketch is linked, right? So it's a linked sketch. We can link sketches between models just like we can link them between features within a model. So if I go back to our assembly here, and we take and activate this punch, if I were to take and zip up above this extrude feature, so there is no extrude right now. I mean, the model's still placed because I'm using some datums and stuff to place it, but if we said create a new extrude, and instead of referencing the curves, we actually reference that sketch itself. So if I hover over this, it's actually the sketch. What happens is the extrude is created and the sketch is linked, right, to the parent. And of course I can individually or independently determine how far it travels this way. I can go the other direction. Let's say we go in 1/4 inch, right? So that far in, let's go a little further. Let's go something like that, right? Hit OK, and we get an extrude feature created using that exact sketch. And the benefit of that approach, or this approach, is since we're not referencing individual curves, as long as this sketch in the parent model exists, it doesn't matter what the geometry is, as long as this sketch exists, this feature is not going to fail. Now, references to that feature may fail, right? So if I took and I needed a round on here for some reason, not that I would actually do this, but let's say I go and I put a round here and here, it's probably a little on the small side, right? We do something like that. If the sketch changes in the parent, then of course those rounds are going to fail, right? So I mean that is a disadvantage versus using quilts as previously discussed. But just to prove this works, let's go to the parent model here, and let's just open this up in its own window, and let's redefine this curve feature. That's the sketch feature that's driving all these shapes. So if I go in here, do edit definition, we delete our star. I don't want to delete the point in the center because that's used for some other stuff. So let's do it like this. Let's go like that. I really didn't want to delete. Actually, yeah, I don't need those either. Oops. Don't need that. All right, so we're just left with our 1 point here. And then let's create some other shape. Oh, let's see. How about the eye profile again? Park it right there. Okay, so we completely changed the initial sketch here. The extrudes, of course, are happy because they're linked. And if we go back out to our assembly and simply regenerate the assembly, you notice the shape of this punch updates instantly because it's being driven by that sketch. Now, the rounds, of course, are failing because the edge references that round had don't exist anymore. So they're not going to work, right? We'd have to redefine those. You know, maybe we want them here and here. Okay, so what are the reasons to do this versus not do this? If the sketch that was created in the parent model, or the shell in this case, is exactly what you need in your other models, then directly linking the sketch makes sense. If you needed this yellow piece to be slightly offset, right, a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller, then you really would be better off using surfaces in some way, shape, or form, because as soon as I start referencing these lines and creating offsets, then they're going to fail when the shape changes. So how would I do that, right? If we go back into this punch, actually let's just zip up above this extrude feature. What we're going to do is let's keep the extrude, but instead of it being a cut, let's just make it a surface, all right? So that we can manipulate the surface as a surface before we actually use it to cut. So instead of a solid, we make it a surface. Everything else actually looks okay. And then, let's say we needed it to be 10,000ths of an inch larger. Let's activate this, go to quilts, pick our quilt, do our offset. It's too much. It can't offset that much because of this shape, but it can certainly do 10 thou. Okay, hit OK. And then we could use that quilt to do our cut in this. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's not going to work. Why isn't it going to work? We can't create a solid from a quilt that isn't capped. So if we hit cancel here, let's go back into this first extrude, do edit definition on it. Let's turn on our capping. Now realize then when we do the offset, it's offsetting it all the way around. So I've got an extra 10 thou of material here as well, which may or may not be a problem depending on what you're doing. But we could then take this outer quilt and we could solidify it, turn it into a solid. And now I have my punch. Now inside that punch is still a surface. If I go to wireframe here, you can see it. That quilt's still inside there. Again, we can just hide it, put it on a layer and hide it. And there's our punch that's slightly larger than the hole, or maybe you'd want it smaller or whatever, right? So that's an option too, would be to link sketches between models. Again, it has the disadvantage compared to a copy geom feature in the sense that there's no update control for the linked sketch. You can't tell it not to update. It's automatically going to update. And if the position of the components changes, it's also going to change where that feature's at. So if we were to take and redefine the position of this punch and try to move it up slightly in the assembly, as soon as we regen, the extrude is going to recreate itself exactly in line with where that piece was before. Matter of fact, I'm going to just demonstrate that. So if I take this particular model, do edit definition on it, let's move it. Let's see, the way I have this defined, I don't even know if I can move it. Let's turn this off for now. Make this a distance, just to demonstrate. Right. So let's say I move it over here for some reason and I hit OK. As soon as I regen this model, it's not that it moved back, it's that the extrude itself was recreated in a new place in this model. And you can see that if I go into it and then look at where the extrude is relative to the assembly's or to the component's planes. See how it's now shifted off to the side compared to where it was before? We moved the part over, but as soon as it regenerated, the sketch says, hey, I'm actually over here relative to the assembly, so that's where I'm going to draw myself. So again, it's another option. A linked sketch from one model to another is another way to get information transferred between models.